this video I wanted to talk about practicing with a shotgun and really what it takes to kind of get started and get a little more proficient. So the first thing I want to talk about is ammunition selection. I have a few on the table here, so I'm going to go through these one by one and kind of discuss the purposes of them and some considerations. Now these are, this is some defense loads, I guess you could say. But anyways, let's go ahead and get to the table and I'll go ahead and explain from there. Okay, so here we have an example of some ammunition that's good for practice and actually good for self-defense as well. So right here we have some slugs, right? These aren't the slugs that I personally use. I just went to the store and picked up a selection of stuff. So these slugs, you have a low recoil version and you have a standard version. Now the standard version, as you see here, this slug is a 1 1/4 ounce or 1 1/8 ounce, and it's going to go 1,400 feet per second. That's pretty good for 1 1/8 ounce. And then you're going to have this one going 1,200 feet per second, same weight load, reduced recoil. That's going to mean reduced velocity. So you got to keep that in mind. And then you have this buckshot here. So the velocity here is 1,200 feet per second, same as this stuff. So basically the payload is going to weigh about the same, right? And then of course you have this Federal double-aught buck, and it has 9 pellets just like this stuff does. And this stuff is going to be going a little bit less, but it's all copper plated and it has flight wad or flight control wad. So apparently this stuff works pretty well from all the testing that I've seen. I've never actually tested it myself, and I will down the line, but not at the moment. And then you have one of my favorites. If you're going to be doing any kind of buck, triple-aught buck, baby. 1,300 feet per second. This is a 2 3/4 inch shell, just like the rest of this stuff. So basically, this is the sizes right here. So triple-aught buck is basically the same size as a 9mm. So if you're going to be doing that, you have 8 pellets of triple-aught buck. You have 9 pellets of something that's smaller, and basically like a 32. And then of course I brought this up. This is not something that I would say is good for self-defense, but a lot of people practice with this stuff. This stuff right here would be good for practice because it's pretty inexpensive. Here in Alaska, this stuff, these right here, $2.99 a box. That's really good for something that could also be used for self-defense. I would not rule this out as a self-defense load. I just would not get the low recoil version of this. I would want more penetration in the low recoil, especially on buckshot and something so small. You're looking at pretty low penetration. So with the low recoil slugs, I would actually consider these for a little bit closer distance, because here's the thing about hollow point slugs. Hollow point slugs expand, right? Well, hollow point slugs are also known to be shallow and penetrating. Look at that hollow point. That thing's already dug in there pretty deep. So the deeper you go with that hollow point, the more shallow the penetration is to a point. Now, if you know anything about the PDX-1, the PDX-1 Defender line for their 12 gauge, I did a video about the pattern testing and everything. And TN Outdoors 9 has done it as well. It's got a pretty good pattern. It's got a slug and double-aught buck pellets. Well, here's the thing. that slug does not break apart like this slug would at close range, because it's not going very fast. And so this is a big consideration when you're actually making an ammunition selection. You need to make sure that the penetration is going to be okay. And I would trust slugs, but when you're having to deal with something like buckshot or something, you're going to have to pattern it. I would prefer just to have a big freaking bullet that's going to penetrate deep. So, and it's not going to liquefy insides or anything. It's not going fast enough to really do that much. It'll just crush whatever it hits, and that's still a pretty big hole. So it'll crush a good amount. So you're looking at about a 70mm hole. So anyways, with all that said, I want to go ahead and talk about drills. So I talked about some ammunition for self-defense and practice, basically. So some things like the slugs, they could be like low recoil slugs. I would say those are good for both practice and self-defense. It's actually a pretty good price considering the cost of slugs on the market. Um, Here's the thing. When you're making that ammunition selection, you're also trying to gauge recoil and get a good amount to kind of pattern it and decide. And that goes into ammunition selection, is if you want to go with buckshot or of some sort, then get it, pattern it, see if it's right for you. If not, go to the next one, pattern it a good amount, and check the recoil, check the reliability. Boom, then you have that. And you want to gauge the recoil on it because you're going to want to find a good practice load. Now, this is where it gets kind of interesting, because now we're going to talk about drills. So, what are drills? I always like to start out with this because it's thrown around so much. It's like it's forgotten what the actual definition of it is. Drills are something that you do so often, you do over and over and over again until it's second nature, and then you continue to do it to where it's something that you just instinctively do. So yeah, second nature, I guess, whatever. But anyways, that is not something that you want to, like courses of fire. You know, people have like the 1 to 5 drill, the Presidente. That is not a drill. That is a course of fire. That is a test. That is not something you do over and over and over again. Maybe it's semantics. Maybe I'm getting nitpicky, but words do have meaning. So anyways, with all that said, what are things that we can actually drill? So things that we can drill is multiple shots, reloads, continuous feeding, and, you know, malfunctions and stuff. So malfunction response. So check, assess what you need to do, and then correct. So those are things that you want to drill on. Now, the best way to drill with these is 90% dry and 10% live. And that's why I brought out that birdshot. And you got other practice loads as well you can get from Walmart for like 20-25 bucks for a 100 pack. So anyways, these are snap caps. These are A-Zoom snap caps. They're full metal, so they're going to have a good weight to them. If you get enough, they're going to be expensive. And they're going to kind of mimic the weight of your defense load, so it's going to be good to practice with. However, they're heavy, and they do chip. So here's one. You can see the rim's nice and chipped, and so it's pretty flat. I actually have malfunctions with these, just, cycling them through. So being metal like this can be kind of a detriment. It can also possibly work on your extractor. You might want to watch that. And it can also stress out your ejector as well, because your ejector is expecting to eject out, probably pushing up against something like brass. So not with this. So anyways, it's not going to destroy it, but be aware of the equipment you're using. So I always recommend snap caps. And so one thing about the snap cap that I would highly recommend that you make sure of, is that it has something for the firing pin to actually strike, like a piece of rubber or something of that nature, because without a piece of rubber, I don't know if you could see that, like pointing this way, but without that kind of material for it to hit, you're stressing out your firing pin unnecessarily, and then that can lead to breakage down the road. And if you're a serious shooter and you practice a lot, you're going to want to make sure that that firing pin has got something that it's actually hitting when you're going click. So, with that said, the other 10% of it on these drills, I do not see it as harmful to go through the motions live with birdshot at first. However, it would be very wise of you, it behoove you, to actually use something that mimics the recoil of your defense loads when you get more comfortable with the motions and you think you've got it down good. That's another thing. So, with that said, the things that you'll want to check out is, like, for a pump action, you want to make sure that you're pumping it and shooting it. You can shoot it really fast at multiple targets. You want to practice that, obviously. You reload, constant loading, malfunctions, blah blah blah. Next thing you want to actually do with this is practice recoil control. Once you've got all this down and you feel like you're accurate and you've got everything that you need, now you need to start working on movements with the shotgun. You need to work on leaning around barriers, like maybe in your house or something like that, simulating barriers at the range, simulating different conditions that you'll deal with. Maybe you have a side saddle, work on reloading from there or whatever. From behind cover, watching your target and not your gun, not doing these little competition reloads or whatever, actually retaining the firearm, and, maybe you have to reload from here or something like that. Find something out. But shooting around barriers, leaning, having an unstable platform with something that kicks, that'll show you a lot. Something that you could do with a rifle is not something that you're necessarily going to be able to do with defense loads with a shotgun. They do kick. They do have some push to them. It's not necessarily too violent as long as you put it in the right place, but that's the other thing you need to work on, is when you're working on these leans and everything, you need to make sure that you're actually finding a good spot on your body and you've got a good lean to the right place and to actually handle that, and also shouldering it and getting into that lean where you need to be. That's important. So you got to work on that stuff. So anyways, now next thing I'm going to talk about is targets. Okay, so when we're talking about targets, one of the things I love to shoot today are steel targets. All I have to do is get a coat of paint. It's a couple of dollars at Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever, the really cheap one, get it black sprayed, whatever. Or you don't have to. As long as you get a ding, you're good, right? So there's a lot to say about steel targets. However, with shotguns, it could be an issue, especially if you're shooting at close range like I do. I have a pretty short, close range. So I have a couple targets. I got one right here and here. So the reason why these tires are here, bounce back, because the ground will actually get chewed up to a certain point. I have them basically low to the ground because I'm planning to actually get in like a Hickok 45 style, as Chooks Outdoor puts it, a Hickok 45 style range out here, and building up my berm a little better so I can have a lot of different targets at different ranges. So anyways, shooting at steel with a shotgun, it can be a risk at short range. So that's one thing that you might want to consider. If you're shooting birdshot, you might not have that big of an issue. Now, these targets from Targets USA, these are actually really good targets. Like my favorite target's very mobile, very easy to set up however you want it. The one problem is that the first generation, they don't really have them around anymore. This area right here, this hole, there was like a loop, and I would shoot pistol rounds, and it would go through that loop and it would come back, and I actually got hit in the chest by a fragment or whatever, and I was actually standing about 10 yards away, and I was straight on with the target. That's the only way it ended up happening. So it ended up just hitting me in the chest. It didn't even leave a mark. It was just like a hello, and it came and bounced off my chest. So it had already lost most of its velocity, but it did that roundabout and, kicked back. That doesn't happen anymore. But with some pieces of steel out there, like, you're not going to be wanting to shoot slugs at them, especially, within 100 yards, because it can damage them. Now, there are some plates that are very thick that you might be able to get away with that on. I don't know if I would risk it, because I've been hit by ricochets and stuff like that well enough to where I've kind of learned my lesson. But you can get more angled targets on steel that will resist damage. The more angled, typically, the better. If you want to risk it, that's on you. But my recommendation is pretty much stay away from steel when you're dealing with shotguns at close range. That may seem like common sense to some people, but you'd actually be surprised how many times I've seen people actually shooting steel with shotguns with bad results. So anyways, let's talk about something else. So, what's the cheapest thing that you can find at any local store? Cardboard. This is cans that I found at Walmart. This is for the cans that they put on the shelf. See these little indents? Yeah, it's from the cans. These are like perfect targets for like checking out the accuracy of your slugs or whatever. Just take a permanent marker and, color in around there. You know, that's all you got to do in order to get your little circles to see how accurate you are. You got 12 holes here that you can mess with. So even if you wanted like a dot torture drill or whatever, staple that thing up to a target. It's very cheap. And here's the thing, a 75% C zone size right there as well. So it's very cheap. It's good for the shotgun. Now, why am I recommending cardboard over paper? Well, it's because paper is very delicate. And if you're dealing with something like a shot, you don't want the paper necessarily tearing. You may want multiple hits out of it. And cardboard will handle it a lot better. Get yourself some nice corrugated cardboard like this Walmart packaging, or, you know, my Meow Meow toilet kit. Get some of this. You basically split it at the seam here where it's glued, and then you can even get a really tall or really wide target. Cut these into little sections. You have some nice solid cardboard to hit on. Draw little circles or whatever that you need to do for your little indicator. This would be actually pretty good for patterning. Getting one of these big sections for patterning, because this stuff right here, one of these little blocks is about the size of this, which is a good C-zone target. It's 75% C-zone, but that's a really good hit area that you're going to want to aim for. So about that. So that's going to be the areas that you're going to want to stay within at certain ranges in your house. So that, again, goes back to ammunition selection. So getting appropriate targets for the task at hand is very appropriate. So it's very necessary for your practice. So that's my little spiel on targets. Now, kind of to close up, I know a lot of people are kind of disenchanted about using a shotgun today because they got like 223 rifles and 7.62 by 39, 308, whatever. The shotgun is has proven to be one of the most effective, depending on its use and the targets it's used against, one of the most effective close-range weapons. So here's the thing. You may not be able to punch through like certain things like body armor or whatever, but most of the times you're not going to need to punch through body armor with things. Sometimes double-aught buck doesn't actually do the trick. There's plenty of instances where people have taken center mass hits with double-aught buck, and they didn't go down. Sometimes people that have been shot with certain types of slugs and they ended up being shallow and penetrating. That's why I recommended lower velocity slugs that will penetrate more, or some that don't have as dramatic of a hollow point. That's some stuff that you want to research in advance. Now, the shotgun I don't think is irrelevant today. I think that it just needs to be used more wisely and where it actually has strengths. And I think it does it has strengths in the home, but I think one of the things that is kind of changing the shotgun world, we're seeing that bullpup shotguns are starting to become very popular. And the reason is, one of the biggest problems with the shotgun is that they're large. I mean, think about it. You got something this large when you're going around corners and stuff. If you were to get something like a KSG, you're shortening it to this right here. So it's literally just basically this. It's just within legal length. It's so short, in fact, that I actually had a fish and game officer when I was shooting on public land back in Washington. He actually asked me if it was an SBR. I mean, he didn't really know much about bullpups, but that's kind of, not all law enforcement officers are going to know everything about guns, right? So they may not know if it's legal or not. So anyways, with all that said, the shotgun, it's going to take a little bit of research and a little bit of messing around to figure out the shotgun. Is it worth it? Absolutely. I think that it still has a good place today. It's not the most inexpensive, but it packs a punch, and it's very versatile. So don't kind of skimp on your research, and make sure that you're getting what you need that works really well. And don't just go with what a police department gets, because typically they're following policies, and we don't want to hurt you too much because we're afraid of legal ramifications and the money that'll come with that. So with all that said, do your due diligence to get proficient and to make wise choices on ammunition, and practicing to be very proficient. And you guys will be able to continue having your good ones. So anyways, thanks a lot. Leave a like, and go ahead and leave a comment below. What's your preferred defense load and why? So yeah, I look forward to corresponding with you guys, and you guys better have a good one.